Okay, boogie, that's right. Oh, shit.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you who have 5 fingers on your hand and can count, you'll recognise there are only 4 of us up here on stage. Unfortunately, Esme could not join us today. But the good news is that I am joined by 3 very experienced, with very different sets of experience, HR leaders, Tara, Rob and Kirsty. And what we're going to talk about is how you align people with your purpose, wherever those people are. And when I was here last year at the Workplace Wellness Festival, there was still this topic of debate. Do you call it distributed? Do you call it hybrid? Do you call it some other name, flexible, whatever it is? And I think certainly the sense I get talking to our customers is we've moved beyond that and we've adopted whatever works for our workplace, still tinkering the edges as we always did, making sure the theory actually works in practice. But amongst that, whatever model you've chosen to work with your people, and some organisations haven't changed at all because there are some jobs that can't be phoned in or video conferenced in. There might not be any change in your workplace. But wherever your people are and whatever it is that your organisation wants to do, you need to get the people to do that thing. And so I'm very pleased to be able to moderate this discussion here with these 3 very qualified people about how you align your people with your purpose. And so I'm going to start maybe with you, Tara, then Rob and Kirsty. If you could please tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your organisation and perhaps some of the makeup of the different sorts of people in your organisation, because I think that context is really useful to understand how you then go about aligning people.
Sure. So I'm Tara Olsen and I'm the APAC HR lead for Capgemini Invent. Capgemini Invent is a part of Capgemini, which is a French consultancy company. So we are a global organisation. Our people are our biggest asset because we are a consultancy company. So it's really, really important that our employees are really engaged and we have a really, really strong culture. So within Australia itself, we have just over 3,000 employees, but across APAC, we also branch out into China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan. So we do have a diverse range of skills, of personalities, of culture across APAC. So it's really important that this is a big focus for us as a HR team around culture and engagement.
And to what extent do you think that might be sort of globally, because you're global, here's the model versus, hey, we're part of a loosely federated tribe of people?
Sometimes it's hard being a part of a global organisation, and some of you here may also be part of a global organisation. So there's many different cultures, but it's really about creating what works best for us within Australia or whatever geography that we're currently playing in.
Thank you. Rob.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Tanti. I'm the Chief People Officer for Opal, Australia. Opal, I've only been in this role, this is my 6th week, and spent 2 years before that, 2 and a bit years before that as a Chief People Officer for SPCR Mona. As best I can tell, and I'm still learning about our business, there's about, Opal is a paper and packaging manufacturer. So we have 2 large paper mills, one in Botany and another one in Maryvale in regional Victoria. And we have multiple packaging sites that do everything from the outers that go in some of the cartons if you work in FMCG, the inners, tub liners that go into food and so on and so forth, and to front-end gondolas that you might see at your supermarkets. All of that bespoke, specialty, made to order. It's about a combination of about 6 businesses in one, 4,500 employees. Many of those, close to 3.5 of those are direct labour, so they work at any one of our sites. The rest are professionals that will range anywhere from sales people to marketers to finance, print technical specialists and so on. We're a Japanese-owned business. The company we're owned by is Nippon Industries, and they're listed in the Japanese Stock Exchange. And engagement for us, we're in a transformation mode at the moment, and that's been particularly tough for people to swallow. So engagement for us is a critical element right now.
And what's the transformation that you're moving towards, Rob?
Into profitability,
okay.
I think, if I could put it that way.
Fair enough. Thank you. Kirsty.
Hi everyone, I am the HR head for Nespresso. Hopefully I don't need to tell anyone who is Nespresso. One of the questions I've been asked in the past is, have I met George? No, I truly wish I had. Nespresso's got quite a big presence across Australia and New Zealand. There are 27 different boutiques, so there's quite a large pool of retail employees, including casuals that work for us. And we also have an e-commerce business, direct to consumer, and we also have a business to business. So everyone's office coffee needs and so forth, can be covered by Nespresso. It's the thing I really appreciate and enjoy is that sense of purpose that you have, that the focus is about the quality and consistency of the coffee every time, the simplicity of it, and then there's such a huge focus on sustainability within the organisation. So it feels like, an organisation that has, quite a solid set of values to work for and, has quite a good presence across Oceania.
And so, Kirsty, you were explaining before that you are also responsible for the retail premises with the complexities of running a retail operation all the way through to marketing and sales and service. Is that right?
That's right, the end-to-end. So there's a field force out there who are out selling through to, the Christmas casual that gets hired in the retail store for just, the seasonal period. So it's huge in terms of diversity.
Yeah, great. So look, I think context is very important for all these things, so thank you for sharing that experience. The first question that I'd like to put to you, and I'll start with you, Tara, if that's okay, is how do you ensure you get that clear and concise communication of your organisational principles or goals or values, behaviours, whichever set of words you use? How do you make sure that you get that clear and concise communication to the people, and how do you know that it's worked?
I think the key word there is communication. So we need to ensure that we're constantly communicating to our team members. If a team member doesn't understand, and I like to use the word team member rather than employee, if a team member doesn't understand how their day-to-day is connected to the strategy, they're not going to be engaged and they're not going to feel accomplished at the end of their day. So I think communicating in town halls or all hands if you have those, ensuring that your people managers and even your middle level managers understand the strategy. So when they're having conversations around a person's performance or their career, they can connect that strategy and those business priorities to that person's career. So that person and that team member understands what their day-to-day and how that influences the overall business performance.
So if I was a team member at Capgemini, how and when would I see those principles communicated to me? Are they stuck on the walls? Is it Zoom backgrounds? What sort of stuff do you do?
So we communicate our values. Those values are on our intranet site, they're on our teams websites, team sites as well. What we generally do is we have quarterly all hands and town halls where we're able to reiterate what we stand for, what our business priorities are for that year, and then again ensuring that some of our sub-teams, when they have their mini all hands or town halls, that they are also reiterating and communicating those strategies and those priorities.
Yeah, great.
So it's all about communication.
So I'm hearing consistency and volume. How about you, Rob, with the different, and maybe it's hard in this current organisation, you might not have seen the full cycle yet?
I could speak to experience across a number of organisations, but it's not dissimilar to what Tara has spoken about. I think what we tried early was a connection with a sense of purpose. I had for a little time a privilege of being the Chief People Officer for Hydro Tasmania. And Tasmanians are very committed to, very passionate about the environment. And so eliciting that purpose into a sense that where we had three separate organisations, subsidiary organisations could buy into, part of what we were trying to do, but to break down the silos between all of those. So it was to find something common. But I think the element is the quarterly reviews and so on, the quarterly town halls. But there was this element of engineering co-creation into that, the co-creation of our values, the co-creation of our purpose. Different at SPC, we were owned by a private equity firm, so private equity hands you the strategy and says you deliver. And so the challenge there is to say, well, if that's what we're required to deliver, then what do we need to prioritise over the next 12 months? And we would think in 12-month cycle. And yes, we had a compelling and invigorating sense of purpose, but it was help us define what are the top 10 things that we as a leadership team need to deliver on. But we also recognise that if some of our factory workers, our direct staff, aren't going to pay attention to the travelling CPO or the COO or the CEO, And what they're more inclined to do is either listen to their delegate or listen to their front line. And so we did spend a lot of time using that channel because they were more receptive, particularly if they don't have their own email address.
Yeah.
They were more receptive to spoken word to personal communication than they were to receiving an email. In many cases, they wouldn't get it. So.
I do recall one of the organisations I used to work for that the people leader would say, right at the time that you are sick of saying this stuff, that's about the time that people start to hear it. And I find that very useful when you're going to your third set of town hall meetings. And remember, we started talking about this. Well, now we're still talking about this, and now we're talking about this.
Yeah.
And I find that reinforcement and consistency is really important.
I think that's a really good point you make, because one of the things that cannot be underestimated, even though they say the priority is building the relationship between the line manager and the front line, there's still a requirement for people in our roles and in the C-suite to walk the floor and talk to people and engage. That carries a lot of weight. And if you're not doing that, you're really going to fail at engagement in your job, because they'll have the odd question that they want to throw your way. They want to trust that you'll follow it up, and you've got to follow it up. And sometimes they just want somebody to hear them out.
Yep, yeah. Definitely. Kirsty, how do you ensure clear and concise communication at Nespresso and make sure it's stuck?
All of the same things. The only build I have, communication is really key, and consistency is key, and repeating the message is key, but I suppose the couple of builds is one. I think you really do need to have a simple narrative. I think sometimes what we do is we make it complex. The more complex we make it, the harder it is to get it down the line and not have Chinese whispers. I actually recently learned that saying Chinese whispers is culturally inappropriate, so apologies if I've offended anyone. I heard that was used on maths, and some Americans were a little bit up in arms about Australians' use of that terminology. So anyway, I digress. But I do think that the simplicity of the narrative is really important, because if you want it truly understood, I've gone down, to a boutique and maybe asked someone what they understood to be Nespresso's purpose, and I've had 10 different answers. And they are all to the theme, but that's because, we are very clear, we are, keeping it super simple, we do know what the purpose is. And they might have some different nuance, it's based on the different role that they have, but that is based on years and years of effort of trying to ensure very simple messaging and consistency. The other thing is not just simplicity, but consistency. I actually find I've worked for businesses where they've tried to change the lens through which they share their purpose and share their message and share their objectives down to the team year on year. They've changed it up. Maybe they thought something wasn't working. What wasn't working is them changing it so frequently. The consistency of keeping that messaging going, it's sometimes, like you say, where people start to, you think you're sick of saying it, you need to say it at least 7 times before it gets heard, and you need to say it in multiple channels and in multiple ways sometimes for the message to be heard. So I think those are my key sort of takeouts on that.
Yeah, thank you. So we're communicating clearly, consistently, constantly, all over again. In that sort of environment, how do you then create a culture of accountability and transparency in a workplace where you can't go and verify everybody's work all the time? In that hybrid workplace, how do you create that culture of accountability, Tara?
It's a really good question, and it's something we're going through at the moment. So we're currently going through a cultural transformation. So the first thing you need to actually start thinking about is, what does that culture of accountability and transparency look like in your organisation? So some of the things that we thought about was, 1, people have positive mindsets. 2, people are really connected to the strategy and the business priorities. 3, people understand if they have a growth mindset and they grow from their mistakes. I think that's really, really important. So essentially, that happens independently of where anybody is. So whether they're working within the office, whether they're working virtually. So essentially, it becomes an ethos, and that ethos someone can take wherever they work. So if you're lucky enough to have a policy where you can work anywhere in the world, so maybe that person's taking that ethos at a beach in Bali. So some of the things that you have to look at, because it doesn't come organically. So you actually have to strategize around thinking about this culture. So one of the key things, I think, there's quite a lot, but one of the key things is really around leadership. So it has to come from the top down. I think you need to lead by example, whether you're a leader, whether you're a manager. So if you are able to be a leader that's accountable and also transparent, you're going to have people that want to follow you and people that really align to that. So I think that things that you need to do is ensure that you are able to own the successes that you have, be really transparent about those successes, but also be really vulnerable to talk about your failures as well, because if you're being accountable for that, your team members are going to align to that and want to align to that way of working.
Yes, I like that idea. So how then, as an HR leader, how do you help the other leaders in the business walk that talk? How do you help them get through that?
Yeah, so there's only so much learning and development you can do. So we do have an accountability training for our managers. We find it somewhat successful, but it just doesn't stop there. So it's really about how they apply that on a day-to-day basis. We really encourage our leaders to be as transparent as possible. So again, if there are failures happening in the business, or if the business maybe is not doing so well, or their team's not doing so well, is to be able to be transparent and communicate that. Again, communication is really key for accountability and transparency culture.
Yeah, great, thank you. Rob, creating a culture of accountability and transparency in a hybrid workplace.
I think it's a holy grail of our role. I can't say that I get it right, but it's this sort of voyage of discovery in every organisation I work in. A lot of what Tara's spoken to, and I'd imagine many of you are playing with the same ideas, but we sought initially to build a sense of ownership and agency in the business. So, anything we do is around, how does this help the business and how does it help our employees? But then, because we are a commercial enterprise, it does need to get down to, well, as a leader of others, you're accountable for your behaviour and you're accountable for certain measures in the business. We took a lot of the noise out to Kirsty's point in understanding what the purpose of the communications were, but then also to rationalise, let's say, curate the measures to what was really necessary in a job like that. And look, in a manufacturing sense, people that are familiar with lean or continuous improvement know that you boil it down to 4 or 5 things that you say, guys, just focus on these things. It's not just about the numbers, it's about people, it's about quality, it's about velocity, it's about costs. And when you meet at the end of the day and you're ready to transition your shift to the next shift, you're handing over those metrics, and the next shift is just as reliant on that. And that goes a long way to addressing it. The other thing I think that for me has always been, again, part of this holy grail is balancing the need for the organisation to be successful, and it must be successful, but also being curious and committed to helping your individuals be successful. And so that requires a great deal of intimacy and openness into dialogue and discussion. So we tried to engineer that through our performance management program that said, look, it's not just a HR program. And if it's failing as an individual, you've got to accept responsibility for that. And so how do we empower you and help you with the right skills so you have agency when you're talking with your manager? And on the other hand, how do we help a manager articulate it in a way that is fair and reasonable and robust and authentic and consistent? And so we look to try, and I think for us the big thing was the sanctity of the relationship between an employee and their manager, and to bring that all the way down. But it was a simplification of messages, and I think it worked really well. It worked for us when we put in some, at SPC, and it's working for us now at Opal, when we clarify what's important. And I think many of us will understand one of the first things I get into an organisation when I'm learning about this is everybody's really freaking busy. But are they chasing the things that make a difference? I use this phrase, Ben Lexon's phrase, is what we're doing going to make the boat go faster? And if it doesn't, why are we doing it? And you've just got to continually ask that question. So we spend a lot of time just trying to simplify the world of work, but then integrate that and align that with what the individual wants, and every employee will want something completely different from the workplace. Yeah, there are going to be trends and so on and so forth, but we focus on that. And look, I think from an SPC's perspective, we took an organisation that was in the red, disjointed, disconnected, with a very, very terrible safety metric, to a profitable business, growth in revenue, and we just drastically reduced our safety incidences. And all through this consistent message, but everybody's got to be part of that. There has to be consistency. It's not just putting a poster on a board and saying these are our new values. There's this element of saying, well, how do I make it work in this team? Who are we with regard to these values? What's the language we use to hold each other to account? Yeah. And so you try and bring it down to that tribe level more than anything else. Again, it's a voyage. You get it right sometimes, and other times you completely cock it up.
Thank you. Kirsty, creating a culture of accountability and transparency in a hybrid workplace.
From a different, same sort of lens as you is that clarity piece. But sometimes, I've asked people, why are you focused on this? And actually what I've found is there's perhaps a lack of clarity about roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes where someone's working on what they think is the right thing, but they're just a little bit, let's call it misguided. When you clarify what, those roles and responsibilities and who has accountability for what, you find the blind spots, the parts, that are gaps in between those different roles, or where they're bleeding over the top of each other. It's by asking the question and then linking back to, if you're having that effective communication and cascade of accountability and responsibility, you can then draw it back to go, well, this is what we should be focused on, or this is how we can make some, clear lines of sight between your role and other roles, and how you work seamlessly together. That's kind of like the little bit of, that tiny bit of Lego in the middle that you were missing, that you needed to just bolt on to make your Starship Enterprise.
And do you find that's a job design thing, Kirsty, or is that a day-to-day management focus?
I reckon it's more, it's less job design. We all have the best of intentions when we're creating structures and organising roles, but sometimes it's the nuance that is, at the end of the day, when you actually get down to the nuts and bolts of doing the day-to-day job, and then you have, time passes and different people go into different roles, and then you find they've got different priorities or different agendas or different things they're interested in doing, and then sometimes these sort of gaps and, or these overlaps start to form, and that's where it's sometimes just a conversation you just need to have on occasion to go, why? Why are you doing this? How does this work? How does this fit in? And then you can actually draw them into having, a better reality check on what they should be doing.
Yeah, I like that idea, and building on your point, Rob, about making the boat go faster. Lots of people are busy, but not everything is contributing towards the process.
Look, they're working their asses off, and it's frustrating them. I mean, you talk to people that are really busy, and if they're not seeing at the end of their week progress against the things that matter, even though they're busy, they're disincentivized, they're demotivated, they're not feeling like they're successful. And I think if you start with the premise that people just want to be successful in their, not just in their role, because success is defined, as work is just part of what that is. It's his ability to give people that chance to say, well, if I understand what success means to you and I can connect you with what success means to the business, how can I help you stop doing the things that aren't helpful and focus on the things that are?
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And so that's a neat link into our final question for discussion, which is how you go about doing that and provide access to the right tools and technology and resources to those people wherever they may be. So maybe, Rob, if I go back to you, how do you provide those tools and resources, whatever they may be? What are they, and how does it get to the people that need them?
The standard arsenal, Teams, Zoom. What really worked for us managing remotely was we used Trello. And so Trello was just a sort of online project management, agile application. So as the team, when my leadership team would come together and when the entire team would come together, we would go through the projects that we had in our schedule, and we could discuss how we were progress against every one of those. And there was still an element of accountability. You showed up to a meeting on time, and ready to present, to give an update. It was less automated. I think we were kind of informal about the way we used it, but it helped us as a business, but it also helped the organisation when we were trying to get a connection between the top 10 things that matter in a business and then the people that were working on that. So that was helpful. But Teams, I think the kind of question you hear a lot of in Teams is, can everybody see my screen? It's that kind of stuff that you just this new vocabulary we've all embraced. But look, the standard arsenal will be fine.
Kirsty, Nespresso, part of Nestle, part of lots of tools and resources around?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to appreciate that there are some people who aren't in corporate roles, in boutiques, in retail or other environments that don't have the same access to technology or the ability to do different things in their day. So, again, it's the same arsenal, but I actually have found the best things that have had the most resonance are the ones people can access on their phone, because it gives true equal access to people. So apps on phones. For example, Workplace by Facebook, I find is a fantastic medium. When everyone's engaged and truly posting, it's the best way to collaborate and communicate across an organisation. And other sort of similar things, that just the tech that is available these days and the quality of it has improved leaps and bounds post-COVID or during COVID, and taking advantage of it. It's also knowing which ones to take advantage of that work for your organisation, not over, indexing on it, because, that goes to overwhelm, but really having the, few key collaborative tools that are available that are truly accessible by all employees makes a difference, because it levels the playing field and enables everyone to equally participate. So that's how I'd...
Yeah, great, thank you. Tara, your experience?
I agree with what has been said. I think it has to be accessible to everybody, and again, leaders need to be showing that they're using these tools as well. But I think on the flip side of that, we also need to be careful about fatigue with a lot of these different tools. Teams fatigue, Zoom fatigue, more than ever, we're sitting maybe on a computer chair staring at a screen for really long periods of time. So I think as leaders, as organisations, we really need to think about how these tools are impacting our employees' well-being as well. So maybe putting things in place so people can step away from their screens. And it definitely is great that you can have accessibility on your phone. But again, that just makes team members look at their phone quite a lot as well. So just little things, like something that we do in my HR team, we're doing sort of a June fitness. So everyone gets to step away for an hour or two from their computer, and we do something fitness. We do like Pilates, people go to F45, and so we sort of track that. It's just really encouraging people to step away from those tools every now and then as well.
So that's interesting. And do you monitor that to see whether people are doing it? Hey, Rob, you haven't stepped away from your thing this month. How do you sort of balance the freedom, but also making sure that people are actually doing the right thing there?
That's really important. And I guess it depends what organisation you're from, but we really encourage looking at outcomes and results rather than the hours that a person puts in a day, or how many days they work a week. So it's really around the outcomes. So I'm quite happy, and we encourage our leaders to be quite happy if that person just wants to work 5 hours and they've achieved what they've had in that day, then we're okay with that as long as the results and the outcomes are there. It's not necessarily that we track it, but we encourage it. Okay,
so I can see that working really well in a service environment where the output is intellectual property and you cracked it or you didn't. What about some of the other organisations where that's not necessarily the key outcome?
We lost the bandwidth to manage and monitor, and we thought that the main purpose was to facilitate engagement in comms. Great examples where in Hydro Tasmania we used Yammer, and our employees self-curated. There was a group of new mums who set up a website, and they would communicate and share ideas with each other. There were industrial engineers, civil, water. They would share their knowledge that way. So if it was happening, we were really pleased. We'd drop in, put a note if there was something we came across, and that was fantastic.
And Kirsty, have you managed to bridge that?
I think that we start with trust. Because if you actually trust someone to do the right thing, by and large, they're going to deliver on that trust. It's when you assume that they're not doing it, that's where you're showing your employees you don't have faith in them to get their job done. So if you start with trust, and then you've got to be, though, prepared to have the conversation with someone who you feel like isn't actually upholding their end of that trust bargain. And that's, sometimes a sensitive conversation, but you can't avoid that conversation. So that's really my perspective on it, and one that I think I've seen play out. And I actually think it has its returns, because I see people working very hard. I don't see anyone truly abusing that trust, and they are delivering.
Yes. Fantastic. Look, thank you very much. Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, audience.
Thank you.
We'll be at the back. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, good.